Do you know of the 80-20 principle? Yes, Pareto's 80-20 principle. Do you know carpenters have a similar language? It's called the 19-20 principle. You don't know? अरे sir, 19-20 का फर्क है. Whenever carpenters are working at your home, कुछ भी बनाएगा और उल्टा सीधा होगा. बोलेगा sir, 19-20 का तो फर्क है. Call it the 19-20 principle. In today's episode, we'll cover factory-made kitchen versus carpenter-made kitchens and which one should you buy. Point number one, manufacturing. Factory-made kitchen made in the factory and assembled and installed at the customer site, whereas a carpenter-made kitchen is typically manufactured at the customer site itself. In very rare cases, carpenter might opt to manufacture the kitchen in his workshop, but still he has to carry those bulky boxes to the customer site because he cannot transport the whole thing in an unassembled form, unlike a factory-made kitchen. Still, it is very difficult to carry, and yet when you bring those bulky boxes, they have to make adjustments. So mostly a carpenter will manufacture it at the customer site itself. Finishing, point number two. So in factory-made furniture, you have a set of machines in the process. You have a panels for cutting, you have an edge banding machine to apply the edge band, you have cold press machine to uniformly paste the laminate, and you have multi-boarding machine which is used to make the boxes using minifixes and wooden dowels. So since you are using machines for each of the process, the laminate fixing which is done using the cold press machine, it's uniformly pasted. The plywood which is cut using the panel saw, it's cut up to a millimeter. Then when you're using the PVC edge banding machine, it is neatly pasted across the sides. And since this panel saw and all these machines, they prefer to use calibrated plywood. So ultimately when you're getting the output, it's extremely uniform and even, which makes the finishing look brilliant. However, for a carpenter-made kitchen, this is not the case because it solely depends on the skill of the individual carpenter. So let's say you're working with a carpenter team. Very rarely you will find that all the 3 or 4 carpenters which are working for your kitchen are equally skilled. Probably one will be very good and the other 2 or 3 are very average. So at the end of the day, it is solely depend on how good your main carpenter is and how experienced the guy is. And still, even if he is good and if he's able to deliver a great finished product with a proper laminate pasting, with proper edge banding, with trimming the edge banding to ensure a very smooth and uniform look, still it will take him a long time. Which brings me back to the third point, time. See, when you're using a factory-made kitchen, they typically take about 7 days to 10 days max to manufacture and install your kitchen end to end, and provided the team is not working on any other project. However, when you're using a carpenter-made kitchen, they take anywhere from 3 weeks to 1 month to just manufacture and deliver one. So you see it's a huge time difference between a factory-made kitchen and a carpenter-made kitchen. Point number 4, cleanliness. A factory-made kitchen will not create a mess in your house because the whole thing is done in the factory. Only assembly and installation happens, which typically takes 3-4 days, and there is no dust or anything is involved. Whereas a carpenter-made kitchen, oh man, there's plywood dust all across the house. It's a lot of mess. So yes, your house becomes extremely messy when you're using a carpenter-made kitchen. Cost. Well, it's often misunderstood that a factory-made kitchen is way more expensive than a carpenter-made kitchen. In fact, on the contrary, they can actually compete on price. Well, sometimes these carpenters, they tend to cut corners, use cheap materials, they will not apply edge banding. So they do all these hanky-panky stuff and try to bring down the cost. But with machines, you cannot do that. You need a certain quality of plywood, a certain quality of laminate, a certain quality of adhesive to ensure that it gives a very smooth and proper finish. However, if everything else is the same, the cost is very much compatible. With carpenter-made kitchens, you mostly are limited to laminates and plywood because that's what they use and they can do it at home, at your site. But with factory, they give you a lot of options. You not only are bound to just laminates or your plywood, you can use other materials such as a lacquer finish, a PU polish, you can use a variety of laminates, you can do multiple, you can use solid wood, you can do multitude of kitchen designs and kitchen materials one can make in a factory, which you cannot do it at home. Planning and design. So when you're getting your kitchen made, getting proper planning, having a thought process as to how your kitchen will look is essential. So get a 3D designer, and if you need help, get a professional help, get a designer who can help you with the proper planning and also use a 3D software to give you a detailed look of how your kitchen will be, along with the measurements with the proper 2D layout of your kitchen, because that will help you select not only the design but also the color, the materials and everything. They need to be finalized even before a manufacturing starts. But at the same time, when you're using a factory made, the measurements have to be extremely detailed up to millimeters, because if there is any any issue with the planning, with the measurements, once your kitchen is manufactured in the factory and delivered at your place, there will be an error, and it will be pretty much impossible to fit the boxes that have come from the factory inside your kitchen space. However, when you're using a carpenter person to do it, well, he is full of desi jugaad. He can, whatever there is any issue with the planning, he can directly at the site itself, he can make some adjustments and ensure that kitchen fits into your space. So that's the difference. Next point, quality of hardware. So let's say when you're planning a little bit of a luxury kitchen, you're using some very high-end hardware such as a hydraulic lifter, corner solutions like Magic Corner, or you want to use a pantry unit, you want to use tandem boxes. See, these are all factory made. They come from big brands and they are measured in millimeters. So as a result, when you're using a factory made modular kitchen, which also uses measurements up to millimeter, they tend to fit better. The finish is usually better because both the hardware as well as what you're getting manufactured in the factory, both are measured up to millimeters. Whereas in Carpenter-Made kitchens, you might struggle a bit because see, at the end of the day, these are modern hardware, luxury hardware. Most carpenters are not used to such level of finesse. So they might struggle to, get this how to fit this hardware and all that. So there will be an issue. Ultimately, it will depend on the skill, the individual skill level of the carpenter, the craft person who's actually working. Timing restrictions at customer sites. Well, this is something that we have experienced every time. You see, in today's gated societies, they have restrictions around work timings of the interior team who's working. For example, you cannot enter the site before 10 a.m. In between 2 to 5, you cannot make any noise or any kind of sound work cannot go on in your site. And by 6:30, you have to vacate the place. So imagine a full carpenter team can only effectively work for 4 hours max in an 8-hour workday. So what's the output? It's half. So look at the time. If you're at work pressure, if you need to deliver something, you need to have your kitchen installed fast. This cannot happen with such restricted timings. And that is the reason why factory made kitchens always are a savior, because the entire work is done at the factory. They only come at your site and they pretty much need 2 to 3 days. And even a 4-hour workday is fine for them because they can just fit it and go in 3 days. So it's extremely smooth. Well, I explained to you the 1920 rule of carpenters at the beginning of the video, right? So 19-20 का फर्क तो हर जगह है ही, और carpenter है तो बस सर 19-20 ही करते रहेंगे. But now that I've given you 9 points to explain the difference between a factory made and a carpenter made kitchen, what do you think? What is your opinion? Let us know in the comment section below. What would you go for? Would you settle for a factory made kitchen or the 19-20 wala carpenter made kitchen? Let me know.